Thank you so much, Michelle. I think it's safe to say that Patsnap's life science tools truly have immense potential. Plus, those videos were pretty cool. So if any of you are interested in going back, rewatching them, and seeing some of those features, they are all listed on Patsnap's YouTube channel, which is also linked in our resources section. Before we hop into the next session, where we're pivoting away from the life sciences space, let's quickly poll the audience. What aspect of targeted searching through the IP lifecycle interests you the most? Can give it a couple seconds. If you're just joining us, coming from the other session, taking a quick poll just to see what aspect of targeted searching through the IP lifecycle interests you the most. Okay, interesting. Kind of looks like it's all over the place. So in today's fast-paced world where information is both abundant and complex, mastering this targeted searching is really important. So with that, I'm excited to introduce you to our next speaker, Christopher Huffins, who is a manager of search services here at Patsnap. He is an architect of targeted searching through the intellectual property lifecycle, and he's going to shed light on a critical aspect of innovation, which is actually finding and navigating the wealth of information and data that is available. Chris is lost you for a second. Chris's expertise lies in seamlessly navigating all aspects of the intellectual property lifecycle, unlocking insights that drive innovation, and strategically positioning businesses for success. Over to you, Chris.
Good morning and welcome to today's webinar here on using targeted searching through the IP lifecycle as part of our Frontier 2023. My name is Chris Huffines. I'm the manager for search services here at Patsnap. And so that means that what I do is I handle prior art searches, FTOs, and state-of-the-art searches. But before this, I did a lot of targeted ideation and innovation. So today we're going to take the entire life cycle and talk through how we can use specific search type tools in the various stages. That's going to be from ideation through application and patent grafting and the various prosecution phases, and then all the way to monetization and assertion. And the other thing we're going to do with each is we're going to talk about how each of these searches allow you to improve that work product, save some time, save some money, get a stronger patent in the end. So we're going to talk through our 5 different spaces here. Ideation, when you're building an application portfolio, which is still pretty much part of ideation. Then when you're drafting your patent application, monetization, and finally infringement or assertion, depending on which side of things you're on, and which tools you can use for each. So we're going to start off with ideation. And specifically, we're going to talk through right before you begin a rational inventing process. And what I mean by a rational inventing process is you can just have your R&D guys in the lab doing fun things, and when they come up with something neat, they hopefully give you a disclosure or at least a write-up, and then you make a decision based on what has come in naturally or passively in order to what you're going to prosecute, what you're going to file on. A rational ideation process or innovation process is going to be where you decide on the front end the spaces in which you want the company to go as far as inventing, and make sure you build out ideas in those spaces. And R&D is focused by you instead of you being focused by R&D, assuming you're in the C-suite, you're a CTO, you're a patent attorney. If you're in R&D, obviously it would be flipped. So the first thing we're going to talk about is using a landscape. And when I talk about a landscape, I also do mean state-of-the-art, because in a lot of ways, a state-of-the-art search is just a mini landscape. And what a landscape is, in this case, is going to be an in-depth review of a technology space. It's a very broad search. You try and grab everything that's been filed in the last 5 or 10 years, and then you start analyzing it. You start seeing what are the filing trends, where's the white space, which inventors, which companies are interesting, that I need to be on the lookout for and figure out what's coming in. Who might my disruptors be that are just now emerging? and what individual patents seem to be gaining a lot of citations, a lot of interest, things I need to watch out for. And each of these is an entire discussion on its own. But the ones I want to talk about the most are going to be our white space and our filing trends. The nice thing about white space is going to be that you can see exactly where your openings are going to be, presumably, that you want to invent into, because no one is, as far as you can tell. With filing trends, you can do two really neat things. The first one is, of course, you're seeing where someone is filing. You're seeing where patents are going into, what spaces are getting very crowded, and therefore maybe not that profitable to invent into. But you can also start anticipating where filing should be occurring. You do that two different ways. The first one is, let's say you have a competitor you know of, you are Blue Origin, you're looking at SpaceX, say. And you can say, okay, 5 years ago, according to patent data, you were filing in this technology space. And then 3 years ago, you shifted to this other technology space. Let's say we're talking about autonomous delivery drones. So we're not talking about SpaceX anymore. And 5 years ago was all about motors. And apparently that got solved because 3 years ago, you switched to sensors and figuring out pathfinding. And then a year ago, it's really into GPS and algorithms for pathfinding. So you can see that trend of movement from first get the thing to even fly, then not to crash into anything, that's the sensors, and now to get someplace, that's the pathfinding. So you can start seeing how a company has moved and therefore what they're focusing on and what they're not. The other thing you can do is you can do the gold rush problem, which is, as an inventor, sometimes you want to go for the gold. You want to get out there in the field and stake a claim and try and find gold and make $1 million right off. Sometimes you want to be the guy who's selling supplies to the gold miner. You want to say, okay, I see where you're filing. There are obvious or there are foreseeable problems or needs that are going to arise from where you're filing. How can I meet those needs? And that's where you're going to file into instead. And either way, filing trends allows you to make those decisions and invent into those areas. Specifically with white space, you're trying to cross two different sets of data and see what's there. You're almost always going to use a heat map of some sort. You can see on the screen, and you're trying to determine, okay, let's just break this out by class codes, CPC subgroups, let's say. How many patents are in the delivery drone space are looking at battery power and temperature control? How many patents are in battery power and fire suppression? Because LiPos do tend to blow up. How many of them are in engine control or engine speed control and battery? And when you can look at these crosses, you can say, well, there's a lot of patents where these two combine, but not these two. And down here is where I want to invent, because there's not a lot of patents there. And part of the magic of a landscape is that taxonomy is, knowing what the analysis is, trying to break out to the correct categories, break out to a lot of different categories, and then running a bunch of crosses, trying to figure out exactly where you can find these insights. You want to run this as fast, as frequently as possible. And so you really are going to want a tool that allows you to run that kind of search very quickly, run multiple sets of data. The most important thing with the landscape in this kind of analysis is that you're understanding your technology area. You really need to figure out from your landscape what's going on in this thing, who the players are, where the filing trends are. Then you want to gain insights. That's going to come from all those crosses. The most important thing as far as the landscape goes is that is your foundation for your inventing. If you are doing a targeted innovation of any sort, you need to understand where you want to target. You need to know what the landscape is before you do that. And then a logical landscape can also, during the inventing process, be a scaffold that allows you to have done all the logical thinking on this already, and you can focus on the creative thinking and develop some really good patent ideas, or at least invention ideas. So to invent from a landscape, we're going to go and use the technology of delivery drones. And this is very much from a news article I read recently talking about delivery of prescription medication to students at Texas A&M University. And I had know Texas A&M very well. I know how it's laid out, and I understand that that's a huge campus with a ton of students. And it's a really nice system, but the news article made a specific point of saying that anything that was controlled, like say ADHD medication, was not being delivered. It was unsecured medication. And so I thought, well, we're going to invent in this space today, and then we'll get some additional things around it. So having done our landscape, I noticed a few interesting things here, specifically that there's a lot of patenting in sensors, in pathfinding, or algorithms for determining where you're going, motors and batteries. It seems like this space has done a lot of work in how to get this thing to actually fly, not crash into anything, and do the kind of autonomous vehicle part of things. The actual delivery logistics are not as heavily patented yet, though of course the 18-month window is in play. There's seemed to be some pretty decent white space in recipient security and authentication. I think the assumption has been that these would be more like home delivery, and so you're just going to an address and all you have to do is get there, hence sensors and pathfinding. And I didn't find a whole lot of patenting in solving the problems that are arising from the delivery, serving the gold miners. So things like refrigerated delivery, or how do you deal with something that would need to be signed for if it were a human delivery. So it seems like we have two pretty good spaces to go into, our security authentication and then our add-on or our problem solving. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and invent in those white space areas. We know where they are. We'll be focusing on that. We will then tend to ignore the ones that are more heavily invented in, because why? Somebody else already has that. Should be easy enough to license in. We'll invent in our problem areas because, again, we know that's someplace that we should be able to monetize eventually. And then as we interact with this, we'll start locating and partnering possibly with inventors or competitors that know what they're doing, that already have that battery space, that motor patent, that we just need to not worry about right now. And of course, we'll find some areas to follow up if we need to later. So based on all of that, we generated a specific invention for secure delivery of prescription medication, specifically one that is going to be something like Ritalin. That's an ADHD medication that is a controlled substance. You need to have some security on it. You can't deliver it just to anybody or any place. It's got to go to a specific person. And so what this invention is, it's a delivery drone with directional two-factor authentication for both the drone and the recipient, at the end of which the drone will know it dropped off to the right person and the person will know received their package from the right drone. And specifically, we're going to make sure that this is going to be for something relatively small, relatively light. We're not going for extremely heavy or bulky. So these will be fast and light drones. So the invention is pretty simple, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if somebody else already came up with this one. But what it does is you have three main components that you will need, other than the person and the drone and the package. The first is your light array. This is going to be a more or less blinkered or shuttered light array that will shine in more or less one direction, that's on the drone. And it needs to be bright enough that it can be seen from a distance by a device like a phone camera. Obviously, you'll have your package, which will not be released until things have occurred. And then your user will have a smartphone that it has both a screen and a camera, which smartphones do. Shouldn't be a problem. Step one, the user and the drone go to a specific geolocation at a specific time or time range. That's your first item of authentication. The right people in the right machine are the right place at the right time. And my thinking is this is outside of the dorm. This is a specific delivery area. This can be this space near the student center. It doesn't really have to be anything more formal than that, just a specified time and place. Obviously, for a student, walking between classes makes a lot of sense. So the first thing is the drone. The second thing I should say is the drone authenticates itself. It flashes a dedicated light array in a specific signal that the smartphone knows to look for, and the camera can then identify that and see that. The idea here is that there may be 40 or 400 drones wandering around campus. We have enough timing and enough color choices from this light array that you can go and assign unique ones in anywhere viewable from that geolocation. And it can be something like running lights, where they are constantly available so the recipient can scan each drone they can see, or it can be something that's flashing a specific signal, like a lighthouse signal. Third step is now that the phone knows it sees the right drone, it displays a QR code. And so the recipient sees a QR code and turns it to the drone. The drone can then use its camera system to look at the QR code and be like, aha, this is the right person, because they have the correct QR code. And therefore, we now mutually authenticated with our second authentication means, and the drone delivers the package. And for things where this is more necessary, it probably would be something that they would do anyways. The camera will go ahead and take a picture of the recipient, so we know that Bob got his medication at this specific place, the specific time, and this is the ID of the package. That's our invention. Pretty straightforward. So let's go and start talk about our next step here, which is going to be portfolio building. When you are engaging in targeted innovation, there tend to be two steps. The creative step, which is classic brainstorming, throw everything at the wall, nothing's off limits. Just keep being as fast and light and creative as you can. And then a destructive step, which is what you do afterwards. You look at all those crazy ideas you came up with, you have 2 or 3 or 10 times as many as you need, and you start picking them off because they're not feasible, they're not going to be profitable, they're not going to be patentable, whatever reason you need to take ideas away. At the end of which time you should have built a portfolio of inventions that all hang together into a complete product. So in this case, it would be something along the lines of, let's say you have 300 inventions, you're only going to have enough money to file on 30 of them. And so let's pick the best 30 we can to build an entire delivery drone product. We can. To do this, you're going to use a tool called a knockout search. I do a lot of prior art searches. We semi-artificially break them out to knockouts, patentabilities, and invalidities. And there are actually inherent organic differences between them. But really what we're doing with a knockout search is the focus on what we're trying to find and what we're working with. The knockout search, we are looking for, more or less looking for 102 novelty art. More than anything else, we're trying to figure out, is this thing going to get killed just right off the bat? Is this a complete waste of time and money? And so knockout searches tend to be done in batches. So you'll have 30 or 40, or in our case, maybe 100 knockout searches that are used to find that art. You are really prioritizing filing, whether this is something we need to even spend time and money on at all. The other thing that you're doing is, as you do knock something out, but you're building your portfolio and you say, well, I really do need this. Yeah, I know I knocked out all my sensor patents, but I really do need something to bring to the table that's got sensors. Well, then you have to do some further inventing. Or if it's just a linchpin piece, your entire process depends on this light array and this invention. Well, somebody's already patented that thing. You need to go ahead and do some further inventing to get so then you can use as a linchpin. The other big difference is going to be, this is going to be idea focused. Between knockouts, patentabilities, and invalidity searches, yes, there are different points in the IP lifecycle, but they also have a different starting point. With a knockout, you're much more vague. You just have an idea. You have literally the 3 things I showed you there, 3 steps. With a patentability, you've got something a lot closer to an application, a full disclosure, maybe even a draft application. With an invalidity, you have a full granted patent to work with. So here we're looking at the idea. And so what you do with a knockout is you define the invention. You take that idea and say, well, yes, you have your 3 steps. What else do you need? Well, we need a drone. We need a package. We need some GPS to actually do a geolocation. You define what the invention has to have in it. And then you start generating your search strings. With a knockout search, because you're going fast and light, semantic search is your first tool you always should use, because semantic search will give you a great result or it'll give you nothing at all, but it will do it in about 5 minutes. And so therefore you can know immediately if you do have something that semantic will find, knock it out, move on. If you need to, don't find anything semantic, start working with keywords. Classification codes are always a good point here. You can go ahead and mine your landscape. You know your class codes were there. You know what your categories were there. Go ahead and use that to again, do a broad search to find something. Once you've done that, just once you've gone through, run your knockouts and decided what you do and don't have that's viable, then you start looking at your pieces. What are my core patents I'm going to need to have to make this thing work? What is my fence or my DMZ around those core patents where, yeah, I don't necessarily need this, but it's a really nice piece of fencing to keep a competitor away. So for example, on this delivery drone, you might have a core patent that's on your camera system. That is how you detect the QR code. You may want to have some other system that'll give you the mechanism to do that. So you can't be invented around, and that camera and that QR code scanning ends up being worthless. You can also go ahead and use your, again, landscape mapping to determine what categories you need to build in. But all around, you're going to be covering your bases, getting the best set of patents all together that you can. And when you absolutely have to, since you're still in the ideation stage, go back to the well, invent some more. Let's say you determine that you're just going to be in trouble on this one, then you need to go ahead and invent another thing. And in fact, in this particular example, the knockout searches found, there were some similar patents dealing with authentication. In fact, we had the graphic from one there, but nothing was found that used light signals specifically. So that piece seems to be pretty well okay. Some other signal types also were not patented, so we could invent into those to build our wall around our core patents. And with some of the other inventions we dealt with, there were some novelty, there were some obviousnness, things we just didn't really want to deal with one way or the other. We knocked some of our group out. What do you do based on that data? The first thing you do is always run alerts. In patents, you are always at the mercy of the patent office and how long it takes them to publish something. The US, 18 months. And so you just don't know what got patented the last year and a half. With alerts, you will find out sooner than any other way. And alerts are going to be run a search, make sure you like what it is, and then every week, every month, on a predetermined schedule, anything new that is responsive to that search will get sent to you. And so if your competitor filed a patent a year ago and it gets published and you are going to need to deal with it, you'll know as fast as you can with something like an alert. The thing that we'll do is we'll take our disclosures, our invention ideas, and these don't have to be fully built out into full disclosures yet. And we're going to break them out into where our actual applications need to be. These individual ideas can be very, very small, very incremental. And a lot of times you'll get some mileage out of just combining them into omnibus or semi-omnibus, I guess, applications, combining a couple of different things, allowing you to get maybe some efficiencies or have some pieces that need to rely on each other for novelty. Go ahead and have them in one application. Because of the other inventions and because of the obviousness, we had some extra ideas, some things to think about that we thought maybe we should go ahead and make a point of inventing further. And we came up with some ideas of refrigeration. And the idea actually of that was a cold pack. You don't want to be pulling any power off that battery because battery still is an issue for drones. So a physically cold thing or chemical reaction in there providing refrigeration for something like, say, insulin would be a pretty useful piece there, or ice cream. The other thing you could do with your QR code, the drone could display QR code and the user could scan that off of the drone screen, and that could give them data download of any sort. If it's medication, obviously the little printout that goes with it with side effects and whatnot could be very, very useful to have. The other thing that this really springs to mind as a good idea is something involving emergency delivery. With, say, a diabetic, you find them, they are in distress. And if you know what kind of diabetic they are, type 1 or type 2, then you know what kind of treatment they need. A drone can very, very quickly just zip over and drop off a thing of insulin or a glucose tab or something to help that person. And so, and that would require an entirely different suite of authorizations, arguably. So all these are different possibilities you can do. And you can also get some interesting ideas. One thing I always like to think about with doing this type of invent around is go a little silly, because you can come up with some really neat ideas based on that. And my silly idea was the delivery sombrero. So instead of having to grab the package, you have high altitude or low altitude precision bombing into a very large hack, which is kind of silly. It's kind of ridiculous. But when you think about it, well, if it's precise enough, why not into a backpack? Have basically a big filter, a big funnel that can catch something you don't have to actually stop. Or you can do something into a mechanism on a sunroof. So now it opens up, the sunroof opens up, delivery's made, sunroof closes, no worries. So you can take these kind of silly ideas and take them the next step and make them unsilly, and all of a sudden you have maybe a pretty good idea. So that is going to be our ideation stage. So let's say we've gone through, we've come with our good ideas, we have what we want to go forward with, and now we're at the point we want to file our patent application. And at this point, we're going to move on to a patentability search. Patentability search is a prior art search. It's actually very similar in output to a knockout search, but instead of looking at an idea, we're really focused on claims. We're looking for claim destroying art, either novelty or non-obviousness or inventive step. And we actually have something that is claim-like to work with. Either there's a draft claim already in application, we're going to go and make our own pseudo claim where we've got the different elements we think we'll need. And the goal here, more than anything else, is to strengthen the patent application. We've done our novelty search. We think this is patentable, or at least there's a good argument for it. Now, how do we get this application through the process? And so we're really, more than anything else, trying to anticipate what the examiner is going to find and argue if we don't make any changes. So in this case, so we do have a claim. We are going to search on something that looks like this claim. So we're going to have those different elements, much more focus on keyword, much more focus on a full data set, a good strong data set that's got lots of different search types that overlap. We will go and fire off semantic anyways, because again, it's 5 minutes. It's worth the time to even try. But the most important thing with this is also a mapping. We're going to go ahead and dig into exactly how these references harm our patent application and then try to work around them. So we'll take those results and we will improve the application. We'll add some elements to claim. We will draft around something so that it's either specifically included or excluded. We will say, well, if this piece of art exists, the examiner is going to argue X, Y, and Z. Let me go ahead and just get that argument out there in the first place, and hopefully avoid a round of rejections, or at best, if you're good enough, well, this art's out there. It could be used, but if you can get it past the examiner, well, it's in the file wrapper. It can't be used without something else moving forward. And so that can be a really nice thing to defang a piece of prior art that could be troublesome. But in all respects, what you're going to do is go in, find the art that's going to read on this application that you think you're going to draft or that you have drafted, and then start adjusting or editing that application. Worst case scenario, add something to it, do a little bit more inventing in order to improve it, in order to get that application through the process quickly and efficiently. So in this, in specifically with this, again, you're going to use a claim or a pseudo claim. You're not practicing law if you just put Lego claims together and say, well, I need this piece, I need that piece, I need this other piece. You're not doing claim language. You're just doing, these are the pieces I need. And again, you're looking for the art that's going to be identified and the art that you would want to be examined in the way you want to be examined. You want it to be examined. You can frame things for the examiner. The other nice thing about a patentability search with an entity like us is we're not you. So if we look at something and decide it's not relevant, you haven't seen it, and therefore you're no longer under obligation to show it to the examiner. But everything we have shown you obviously is going to be duty of candor to the tribunal sort of thing. You do need to give the examiner that information, and then but it's coming, so you can draft around it. In this particular example, there's a really good PCT application that we had those figures from, and it talks about a little bit different system. It's got a box that it actually lowers down, and that box has multiple compartments, and each of those compartments you have to scan in something to open it up, and so they can have multiple compartments. You go to your compartment, get your product. But that scanned authentication can include a scannable code, a barcode, or a QR code, or a fingerprint, facial recognition, etc. So that's going to be something to worry about, especially from an obviousness point of view, because at that point, we're just interacting with the distance. The drone's seeing the QR code from a distance instead of you're right there showing it to it. So in this case, we probably redraft our claims, focus on the distance use case, that it is acting as both authentication and beacon. or something like that, or it's a QR code that is optimized to be read from a distance. I'm actually not a patent attorney, so I don't know all the tricks, but that would be a good way to do that, to adjust your claims to get past the examiner. The other thing we might do is we might change how the authentication works. We might have QR code as an option, but then add things that are not code. They are not purely visual or not visible light visual. So we might have infrared. We might have a motion or semaphore type arrangement. The user may have to do semaphore, do some sort of motion to self-identify. There might be an animation of some sort on the screen instead of a QR code. You might do some sort of multimedia cryptography. There might be a transform from what the drone shows you and that you show back that allows you to say, I have the code, I have the key for this, therefore I'm the right person. Or you might use a PUF, or physical unclonable functions. In this case, that's going to be something like a fingerprint, actually, but it could be part of your phone or part of a device you have that is itself has a physical adjustment to the signal that makes it unique. So we'll probably actually use that puff specifically, something like a little filter or screen that goes over your phone light or your phone screen when you're accepting delivery, and that will allow you to prove that you are you. And that can be as simple as the imperfections in the screen protector of your phone case or of your screen. I've got a nice big divot in my screen protector, and that may be, this is Chris's phone. It's got that big divot right there, and that may be how it knows who I am, that puff. The thing I might do is might deprioritize this particular application. If there's just a lot of stuff going on there's a lot of art in the way, there's not really any good way to get around it necessarily. It's going to be a lot of arguing with the examiner, or we're just going to get a very, very narrow claim. Then let's go ahead and spend time and effort on other parts of this portfolio. And we'll still file it. It's still important, but maybe it's no longer near essential as it was. And that kind of decision can be made before you spent $10,000, $20,000 on a couple rounds of non-final rejections or even final rejections. So that's your application stage. And you can also do this kind of search at any point. So if the examiner comes back with a piece of art, you can look at it in these terms and take these same kinds of actions before you file your amendment or even drop the application. So things have gone through. You now have your application. Say you've gotten 20 of your 30 through. You've got a pretty decent portfolio there. You have a couple holes you need to fill. Now we're at the monetization stage. I have my patents. I want to use them in order to make some money. At this point, you want an FTO, freedom to operate or clearance search, where knockout and patentability are looking at the patent or the idea, and is this legally something I can get forward with? An FTO is all about risk, and it's legal risk. Is somebody going to sue me in some way or shape? And it's going to end up being a product-focused search or an analysis. So you're not looking at your application, you're not looking at your claims, you're looking at, well, how do I want to build this physical thing? I got a really great deal on infrared lasers. Lights were kind of expensive, so the light array is not as big a deal, but I really want to make sure that I'm not going to get sued on infrared, for example. That's how you're looking at your specific product. It's going to go hand in hand with the physical device or product that you're going to be manufacturing, selling, or using. The FTO is also really useful for a competitor or licensing search. The same people that have patents in a space that is just adjacent to yours, don't have anything to assert against you, but you really need to license one of those, well, now you know who they are. So that can be really, really helpful. Though in that case, you're actually doing something a little bit different from an FTO, because FTO also focuses on active patents in a specific geography. So in this particular case, if you're doing, say, U.S. manufacturing, U.S. delivery, then you only care about U.S. patents. Chinese manufacturing, U.S. delivery, you look at Chinese patents. You might look at Japanese in case those are cross-shipment or a transshipment there going through those ports where they might possibly be blocked. But even then, you're really focusing on China and U.S. If you're looking for everybody, you probably don't need to go past top 5 jurisdictions plus PCT. So China, Japan, Korea, US, European, and then PCT. The other nice thing about an FTO is you're finally outside the 18-month window, by and large. If you're at the monetization stage, your patent's gone through, it's probably taken that full year and a half. And so you actually have, maybe not perfect, but at least full information. Nothing's going to get published tomorrow that's going to surprise you and make things difficult, which is awfully nice. The other thing about an FTO, though, is you don't necessarily want to always be entirely focused on your patents. And that's why we have these 2 images here on the screen. These are from a Mark Rober video about a company called Zipline. And Zipline, as he describes it, takes blood for patients who need it in hospitals in Rwanda. It loads them on these autonomous drone airplanes and flies them hundreds of miles to hospitals. So they have a central location that has a blood supply, receives these orders, and then they literally launch drones with blood packs. They parachute down to the hospital, get taken in, and save lives. So you need to have an idea not just of the patents, but who's out there. Because if Zipline's been doing this for, say, 5 years, and someone filed a patent 3 years ago and tries to assert it, well, you just point at Zipline and say, they're doing this. They did this before you filed. Do you really want to sue me? So having a little bit of a non-patent view in the FTO space is always going to be important as well. But what we're going to do with an FTO is we're going to, again, define our product, just like we define the invention. We're going to figure out what exactly we're doing, what kind of sensors, what kind of camera system, what kind of app we're using. You're also going to want to make sure you know exactly what kind of geography you're interested in. If there's any competitors you need to make a special case of looking at because you know they're out there, that needs to feed into your search. Find every patent you can. You don't want to be too narrow and miss anything, and get your data set. And then you need to do a minimum of relevancy screen. Is this actually on point or not? And if so, if you're going to do a good job, not just a minimal job, you want to do an analysis where you are mapping or categorizing your patents that you found that are relevant to your product categories. And again, those categories can look back at your landscape, can look back at your portfolio categories, because that's what you know you're interested in. And the point of doing this kind of analysis and mapping is, I know the patent exists. I know this competitor is out there. How exactly does their portfolio read on mine? Do they have a lot of independent claims that are just on top of the important categories and they're a very litigious company? That's a problem. Is it a guy in his garage? He's done something kind of cool, but it's a dependent claim in one patent. It kind of reads something I don't care that much about. Maybe you just ignore him. Maybe you throw a small licensing fee that way. But you can't make that decision. You can't make an intelligent risk decision unless you know who's out there, how litigious they are, and what their odds may be coming after you. The other thing that's really important, I think, with using an FTO is going to be, you want to look at things like custom fields or additional data fields. It's not just read the patent and figure it out. It's not a big Excel spreadsheet necessarily. You want the ability to look at these specific data, cross it, analyze it, massage it, really, really dig out data and insights from what can be hundreds, maybe 1,000 patents. And so what you want to do is get as granular as you can, mark things down. And if you have the ability within a tool like Patsnap, make your own categories, make custom fields so that you can have read through and marked up a patent and then run analyses on that markup. And that way that allows you to say, okay, let me look at all of my important category patents, all the ones that are looking at reading a QR code from 300 feet, and who's got those? Do I need to worry about them? Look at, here are my 6 most litigious competitors that have patents. How are they reading on my product? And you can only really do that with secondary data like custom fields that you can search on. The other nice thing about this is, if you're in a continual inventive cycle, you can, at this stage, go, well, I've got a pretty good search. Let me feed this FTO back into a landscape, back into a series of knockout searches for the next generation of my delivery drones. And this you basically can do the job just once, do some of the work just once, but it'll feed into 2 or 3 different phases in 2 or 3 different product cycles. In this particular example, we found a lot of competitors. There are a lot of companies. This is definitely a hot technology space. And there were 2 problem sets. There were large competitors that were doing interesting things for various reasons with delivery drones, Amazon and Boeing, and then a number of first movers who are already out there. And Zipline is a good example. And with FTO, you can find competitors infringing on your patent application. There's somebody out there who's already got that delivery sombrero or something close. There's somebody out there who is selling a cold pack to put in with inside of a box, a delivery box. It's not a separate piece, but still it's a cold pack that's on our patent. So you can start figuring out what you're going to do next. Threat analyses on competitors. Who are these companies? Do I need to worry about Zipline suing me? Maybe not. They seem like reasonably nice guys. Do you need to worry about Amazon suing me? Yeah, they're the 800-pound gorilla. Looking at licensing, cross-licensing, identifying your own portfolio, where your weaknesses are, what you can buy in or license in to prop that up and maybe cross-license the potential competitor, or even just purchase a patent outright. You can, of course, contemplate litigation, both as a giver and receiver of a lawsuit. You will think about, well, is this one worth it going forward with, if at the risk of being sued, or is it worth suing this other entity? Because lawsuits are always risky. And that leads you to our last phase here, which is going to be infringement or assertion. From my point of view, as a search professional, infringement and assertion are really just the same thing. It depends on which side you're on. If I'm looking at a patent that is already granted and I'm doing an invalidity style search, if it is owned by my client, then I'm doing a validity search, which looks just like if it's owned by the client's competitor, which is an invalidity search. But there are definitely differences that you're looking at in different parts of this. But from my point of view, they're very, very similar. And you're doing an invalidity search. Invalidity searches are different from patentability and knockout searches in that they have a pleaded patent to work with. They have a patent that's been prosecuted. It has a file wrapper, has a prosecution history. It has art found by the examiner and rejections and amendments that are very, very useful to mine. It has actual class codes, not just ones that you've assumed, that can also be mined for that information. Makes it a lot easier to search on because you know what's known, and you can leverage that to figure out what's unknown or what you need to add to it. The other really important thing with an invalidity search is you've moved a little bit away from patent. And what I mean by that is that knockouts and patentabilities are lighter and faster because patents are easier to search. It's fairly messy data and there's a lot of it, but it's also somewhat standardized. And we do patent searching pretty well. Non-patent literature is orders of magnitude messier. There's orders of magnitude more of it. And it's just going to be hard to make that whole thing work with searching on this incredibly messy corpus of data that is almost certainly going to be incomplete because there's so much NPL out there that's almost impossible to get all of it. And anything can be NPL. And NPL can be a video. It can be literally could be a painting. It could be a blog post somebody wrote. It could be a research paper that's somebody's doctoral dissertation that's filed in one library, and that's it. It can be a piece of science fiction. Stranger in a Strange Land, very famously, is a piece of prior art that strongly limited a series of claims, and that's Science Fiction Space Magic by Robert Heinlein. So it's hard to find everything out there, and so the early stage patents, the ones that are is this worth it? How do we make this better? Those are going to focus more on patents. Invalidity, though, especially if you're in litigation, you are going for the fences. And so you are going to be looking at NPL because that's your best bet to find something is combination art with something already in the wrapper combined with something new, some piece of NPL that just nobody knew about because, it was written in Finnish 5 years ago, sort of thing. So we're looking primarily at Inventive Step or at 103 ART if you're in the US. And we're also going to make a real point of doing a claims analysis. We have a live claim to work with and looking at the prosecution history, figuring out what was cited, what the examiner said was a weakness of this patent, what kind of compromises really got made to get it granted, and start trying to leverage those and figure out what the primary areas of risk to the patent are and exploit them if possible, or buttress them if it's a validity search. So as we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at our claims, identify our key features from those claims, and those are going to be the pieces that are really important. So unlike with a knockout or patentability, we're building out the claim or the pseudo claim to all the things we need. Here we're taking a full claim and narrowing it down to just the parts that are important, because we're going to be feeding in, let's say, for example, the fact that it's a delivery drone. That's going to go into the search. It doesn't need to go into the analysis because everything we're going to find is going to involve drones. We're going to ID our known art, the things that are in the file wrapper and how they deal with it. And then we're going to start using the searches and using individual types of searches that are a little bit different. Citation analyses, combination of backward-forward citations is very, very helpful because if someone cites to you or cites to your patent, your subject patent, and cites to somebody else that was filed 3 days beforehand, then that's a piece of art the examiner might not know about. That could be very useful. Well, again, we'll do semantic. One of the neat tricks of semantic is it tends to depend on dialect, on the idiom of the language. So if you have say a U.S. family member that you may not have known about before, you can feed that text in, and it should be in American English, which will find American English references better. Or you can feed in British English and find more British English references. So you start playing with dialect, run a couple more searches, and maybe get some references that didn't quite come out. All you had was a disclosure. And most importantly, you're going to be searching your NPL as hard as you can. Again, semantic searching, keyword searching through NPL, and just trying to find something that reads on this. And in fact, in this particular case, we did find a piece of NPL. And in fact, it's a February 2023 article talking about provably secure mutual authentication using PUF, using that physical feature that we were talking about as this is how we're going to get through our patent application. Well, it turns out that there in fact is an article talking about just this. And combined with the patents that are probably going to already be in the file wrapper, this would generate a 103 argument. That would be pretty hard to beat. So were we trying to take out this patent? Let's say we were now a competitor and not the patent holder. We'd be pretty happy right now. Were we not, then we would be having quite an interesting argumentation exercise. But the important thing here is to point out that it really was, we just needed one piece. And we found an NPL, and that's a good outcome for an invalidity search. So our takeaways, there are really three things. The first one is that rational innovation is going to depend on multiple searches throughout the IP lifecycle. If you can go ahead and get in there on the front end and do a good, strong landscape, and then keep up with targeted prior searches and FTOs, then you generally won't get surprised, like, for example, by that piece of NPL. But it is important to use your different searches and your different tools at the different stages and using the right tool for the right job based on what you need to know. If you've got a bunch of disclosures or a bunch of inventions, you're trying to figure out which one's to file on, you're not as focused on very fine-grained obviousness arguments. You're not as focused on getting way in the weeds on every single one. That's just a waste of money. But if you're in litigation and there are tens, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on the line, it's worth the time. Also, your primary areas of risk. The biggest area of risk at the knockout stage is you're going to waste money filing on something that's just not ever going to get granted. Your biggest area of risk at monetization is you get blocked having spent who knows how much getting everything out, built and into the stores by Christmas. So you're looking at different areas of risk, different tool to find that risk, and then eventually overcome it. And at the bottom there, which I think has been implicit but never really stated yet today, is your bright line data, or the thing where it's a clear yes or no, gets less and less likely the farther you go into the IP life of that patent. So it is easier and better for you to find that novelty discussion at the beginning. And that's why you're doing a knockout search. If you've done this right, you're almost certainly not going to get knocked out, absent some sort of weird golden BB, way over in the invalidity stage. It does happen. Art shows up out of nowhere, or somebody looks at it a weird way, or the judge has a bad day. But it's very, very unusual, whereas you do want to and should expect, if you're doing a good invention cycle, to knock things out at the front end on novelty grounds, and to see sometimes a patent application and have to draft around it. But in any case, that is how you do IP searching through the IP lifecycle, from all the way from ideation to your infringement or your assertion. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your frontier.